New details about Ozzy Osbourne's passing have shocked everyone. From quiet warnings to struggles, the truth changes everything we thought we knew. Join us as we reveal the full story. Final bow, sudden silence. What happened after Ozzy's last show? When fans around the world watched Ozzy Osbourne's last concert at Birmingham's Villa Park on the 5th of July, no one imagined it would be his final goodbye forever. The show, titled Back to the Beginning, felt like a full-circle moment, a heavy, emotional return to the very place where his journey first began. He sat on a black throne singing his biggest hits like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley. Behind every lyric, there was a deeper meaning. The fans in the stadium, along with almost 6 million people watching online, clapped and cried. Ozzy smiled, waved, and pulled funny faces. But some saw something different. Exhaustion, pain, a strange quiet behind those wild eyes. "You have no idea how I feel," Ozzy said to the crowd. "Thank you from the bottom of my heart." The roar that followed shook the stadium. What no one knew then was that the man known as the Prince of Darkness had sung his final song. Less than 3 weeks later, on the morning of Tuesday, July 23rd, the world learned that Ozzy Osbourne had passed on. He was 76. The news came suddenly and with few details. There was no exact cause of his demise released right away, but many remembered his long struggle with Parkinson's disease, a battle he had spoken about with rare honesty. A statement posted to Ozzy's Instagram broke the hearts of millions. It is with more sadness than mere words can convey that we have to report that our beloved Ozzy Osbourne has passed away this morning. He was with his family and surrounded by love. The words were heavy, simple, and final. For years, Ozzy had been in and out of the headlines for health issues. But what many didn't know was that those last few months had been even harder than anyone guessed. The farewell concert looked like a celebration, and in many ways, it was. But now, with the truth unfolding, fans and friends are seeing that event in a very different light. It wasn't just a concert. It was a goodbye that had been carefully planned. Ozzy's wife, Sharon, had announced the show earlier in the year. She said he wanted to give fans the perfect farewell. But even she probably didn't expect how close to the end they were. It turns out Ozzy had been quietly preparing for his passing for a long time. Parkinson's disease is a neurological illness that weakens muscle control. It starts with shaking, but can get worse over time. People with Parkinson's often walk slowly, have speech issues, and struggle with balance. They can't cough properly or swallow easily. Even though Parkinson's itself doesn't directly take life, the complications from it can be fatal, like lung infections and choking. Ozzy first revealed his diagnosis in January of 2020. Over the next few years, he had several surgeries to fix damage from a nasty fall in 2019. One surgery, he later said, nearly left him crippled. By 2023, he was done with touring. Still, he wanted to go out on his terms. In an interview with Rolling Stone, he said, "If I can't continue doing shows regularly, I just want to be well enough to do one show where I can say, 'Hi guys, thanks so much for my life.' That's what I'm working towards, and if I drop lifeless at the end of it, I'll pass on a happy man." He meant it. The farewell concert was Ozzy's dream and possibly his way of making peace. From the outside, he looked fragile but joyful. The performance was shorter than usual. He remained seated, yet he gave it everything he had. Pantera frontman Phil Anselmo, who shared the stage that night, later said, "We'd all be different people without Ozzy and Black Sabbath. That's the truth." After the show, there were whispers and online speculation about whether this had been a one-off performance or something more final. Then came a sudden storm of rumors. Just days before Ozzy's passing, his daughter Kelly took to Instagram to shut down a strange story making the rounds. Some people were claiming that Ozzy and Sharon had made a secret agreement, a so-called assisted self-harm pact. "Stop making articles or posts about how you think my parents are having a self-harm pact," Kelly wrote. She blamed it on something her mom had said to get attention one time. She was referring to a shocking interview Sharon gave in 2007, where she said she and Ozzy had agreed to travel to Switzerland for an assisted self-harm if they were ever diagnosed with brain conditions like Alzheimer's. "We believe 100% in assisted self-harm," Sharon had told the Mirror. "It's a final gift of love to our kids." They had even gathered the children around the kitchen table to tell them. Sharon said, "Ozzy and I have asked our lawyers to make the appropriate arrangements." Back then, people thought she was just being dramatic. But now, with Ozzy's passing and no clear cause revealed, old words have taken on new meaning. Was it Parkinson's that caused his passing? Or was it a choice made in private, away from the flashing lights and the stage? The family has not confirmed any of these theories, and Kelly's Instagram post suggests they want such stories to stop. But it hasn't kept the questions from growing. Despite all the rumors, the tributes that poured in after Ozzy's passing reminded the world of what he meant, not just as a performer, but as a symbol. Tony Iommi, Ozzy's longtime bandmate and friend, said he couldn't really find the words, and that they had lost their brother. Geezer Butler said simply, "Goodbye, dear friend. Thanks for all those years. We had some great fun. 4 kids from Aston, who'd have thought?" The message hit hard. 4 boys from a working-class neighborhood had changed the music world forever. And now, one of them is gone. Elton John called Ozzy a dear friend and a huge trailblazer. Metallica, Green Day's Billie Joe Armstrong, Rod Stewart, Brian May from Queen, and countless others posted their goodbyes. Youngblood, who had sung Changes with Ozzy at the farewell concert, shared his sadness. "I didn't think you would leave so soon." It wasn't just musicians who mourned. Millions of fans, from teenagers discovering Black Sabbath on streaming apps to older rockers who grew up spinning vinyl in their bedrooms, all shared their heartbreak. Social media exploded with memories, videos, and teary tributes. Ozzy had become more than just a rock star. He was a character, a symbol of rebellion, a misunderstood genius. His voice had once terrified parents and thrilled teens. His pattern was wild, sometimes dark, but his love for his fans had always been real. Now, with new questions emerging and the silence that follows his final bow, many are asking, did we miss the signs? Did Ozzy Osbourne write the last chapter of his life in a way that only he could? One thing is certain, the story isn't over. The private battles Ozzy fought before his last breath. When news of Ozzy Osbourne's passing spread around the world, it felt like the end of an era. But now, new information is shining a light on the painful road he walked in private before his final days, a road many didn't see. These behind-the-scenes details are now changing how fans are thinking about his passing. One of the biggest surprises was just how sick Ozzy had become, even before his last performance. People knew he had Parkinson's, but what they didn't know was that his body had been falling apart for years. He went through a number of surgeries that didn't help. In fact, one of those surgeries went so badly, he said it made things worse. His words were chilling. "It left me crippled." That wasn't just an offhand comment. It was a sign that his condition was far more serious than people realized. This new look at Ozzy's health paints a much darker picture. He was dealing with a body that had been through too many injuries, falls, infections, and nonstop pain. The truth is, by the time he got on that stage for his farewell show, he was already saying goodbye in more ways than one. Many now believe his final appearance was less about music and more about letting go. There's one quote from him in 2023 that hits even harder now. He said, "At first I was angry at the world, but now I think maybe I just have to accept it." Looking back, it sounds like he had already made peace with what was coming. He wasn't just talking about retirement, he was talking about the end. Ozzy had always been a fighter, but these new details show that he knew the fight was almost over. What's truly heartbreaking is how much he hid behind the spotlight. Even though he was in pain, he kept smiling. Even though his body was failing, he kept singing. Those close to the Osbourne family say Ozzy's condition has become more dangerous than ever. They believe it wasn't just Parkinson's that caused his passing. Other health problems were building up too, like breathing troubles, nerve damage, and constant infections. One small problem could have become life-threatening fast. New signs now suggest that this might be exactly what happened. Doctors say that when Parkinson's gets worse, it can affect the lungs. If the throat muscles become weak, even a simple cold can turn fatal. And Ozzy had already battled pneumonia before. Now some suspect he may have picked up another infection, one his body couldn't fight off anymore. He once joked, "I should have passed on 1,000 times." That line feels very different now. It's no longer funny. It sounds like a man who knew his time was running out. Behind the scenes, it wasn't just sickness Ozzy had to deal with. His past demons never fully went away. In 1989, he once attacked his wife Sharon during a substance blackout. He was arrested, and the marriage nearly ended. Years later, she admitted she was terrified and almost walked away forever. But somehow, they stayed together. Looking at it now, that event shaped everything. Sharon became more than just a wife. She became his caretaker and his voice. She made hard decisions to protect him, including one that changed his whole career. On their wedding day, Sharon gave Ozzy a shocking gift: his contract. She had taken it from her father, Don Arden, who had been managing Ozzy's career. Instead of staying loyal to her dad, she signed Ozzy to a new record label and broke ties with her family forever. That choice cost her everything, but it gave Ozzy full control of his music. Looking back now, it feels like she knew he needed someone to fight for him, because one day he wouldn't be able to fight for himself. As Ozzy's health got worse, he slowly disappeared from public view. But when he did appear, it became clear he was struggling. He could barely walk. His voice was shaky. His hands trembled. Still, he never asked for pity. He had lived life on his terms, and he wanted to leave the same way. Even at his final concert, Ozzy didn't want anyone feeling sorry for him. He sat on a throne, held the mic with shaking hands, and gave it everything he had left. And when the crowd roared, you could see a little spark return to his tired eyes. Now, new details from backstage show just how special that night was. Queen guitarist Brian May said he shared a quiet moment with Ozzy after the show, just a few soft words. That short chat now feels like a final goodbye. Another musician called it the end of a giant. And that's the truth. Ozzy wasn't just a rock star. He was a giant in a world that doesn't make them like that anymore. As more stories come out, fans are realizing how much he had to hide to keep going. The man who once bit the head off a bat had become a quiet warrior, pushing through pain most people will never understand. But this wasn't about fame anymore. It was about finishing his story on his terms. Some fans say his passing feels like the end of heavy metal itself. As one person posted online, when Ozzy passed, a piece of music history passed with him. That's how powerful his legacy was. Even though his body gave out, his spirit didn't. And now, these private stories show a side of Ozzy few people ever saw, a man who hurt, who forgave, who loved deeply, and who kept going until the very last breath. So yes, Ozzy Osbourne is gone, but the new details now coming out about his final days don't just explain how he passed, they reveal who he was. And that changes everything. The shocking post. So far, we've uncovered how Ozzy fought through pain and disease, but now the picture of his passing is becoming clearer and far more emotional. The first revelation comes from the timing itself. Ozzy Osbourne passed away on July 22nd, just 17 days after his final live appearance. Then there's the post that stunned everyone. Only 2 days before his passing, Ozzy shared an image with the words, "Back to the beginning." No caption, no comments, just silence. At first, fans thought it was just another post from his early days, but now it feels like a deeply personal sign, maybe even his final message to the world. It's a moment that gives chills when viewed through this new lens. Another piece of the puzzle is where he passed on. In 2023, Ozzy and Sharon left Los Angeles and moved back to a quiet village in Buckinghamshire, England. At the time, it seemed like a decision to retire somewhere peaceful. But after his passing, sources close to the family revealed that the move wasn't just for comfort, it was for closure. He wanted to be home, not in a hospital, not under bright lights, but with his family, in peace. Fans always imagined Ozzy as the Prince of Darkness, living fast until the very end. But the truth is much softer. Even Jason Momoa, who hosted Ozzy's farewell concert, said the night felt like a pinch-me moment. Looking back, that comment hits differently. It wasn't just excitement, it was awe. Jason likely sensed what many fans didn't, that Ozzy was leaving more than just the stage. He was leaving the world soon after. There's also the mystery behind the cause of passing. The family's official statement did not reveal what exactly ended Ozzy's life. They simply asked for privacy. But considering his long list of health struggles, Parkinson's disease, spinal surgeries, respiratory problems, and infections, it's now understood that his body was reaching its limit. The silence in the announcement now feels more like a respectful pause than a cover-up. Maybe they wanted to keep the focus on his life, not the exact way he left it. Let's not forget the crashes that left lasting damage. After his serious fall in 2019, doctors had to operate on his spine several times. Ozzy himself admitted the surgeries didn't go as planned. Add that to the bike crash in 2003, and you start to see just how much physical trauma his body had endured over the years. These weren't just setbacks. They were signs that his body was giving out. And yet, he still showed up on stage in 2025. Knowing all this now, that last performance looks even more like an act of bravery. He could have stayed home. He could have avoided the spotlight completely. But instead, Ozzy stood in front of a massive crowd, knowing full well it might be the last time. Digging deeper, there's a new appreciation for his final battles. Ozzy spent years trying stem cell therapy, intense rehab sessions, nerve treatments, and even healing. At one point, he described himself as a test subject for medical science. But after all those attempts, he finally said enough. That decision tells us something. He wasn't giving up. He was choosing peace. That choice also explains why he stopped appearing at public events and award shows, even when fans begged for a last sighting. Nowhere is this clearer than in his daughter Kelly's words. Just before his passing, she strongly denied rumors that Ozzy and Sharon had made any sort of self-harm pact. She described her father as full of life and fighting spirit. But after his passing, she opened up about the crushing weight of losing her best friend. That shift from strong denial to deep grief paints a very human picture of a family trying to stay strong. What we do know is this: his final days were shaped by love, music, and private strength, not just pain and illness. Those days were carefully crafted. Sources close to the family now say that Ozzy spent his final weeks planning what songs would be played at his memorial and what kind of tribute he wanted. It was deeply intentional. That's the part no one expected. What's most surprising in all these new details is how carefully he shaped his end. Ozzy Osbourne's quiet goodbye. One of the most telling details came from his silence. Ozzy had always been loud, whether through his music or his bold interviews. But in the final months of his life, he grew noticeably quiet. No tweets, no interviews, no footage from his home. Many thought it was due to illness, but now we understand it was deliberate. Ozzy was pulling back from the noise. He was preparing. Sharon Osbourne once described him as tired of fighting, but not weak. That one line hits harder now than ever before. He didn't surrender, he just knew when it was time to stop. Looking at that now, it's clear he had already accepted the end long before anyone else did. One small but powerful detail stands out. the removal of all tour equipment from their home in Buckinghamshire in early July. A moving truck was spotted carrying out amplifiers and lighting gear. At the time, fans assumed it meant he was changing homes again. But a close friend of the family later confirmed the truth. Ozzy had packed up his stage for good. It was his way of letting go. Even Ozzy's beloved pets were reportedly moved to another residence weeks before his passing. As strange as it sounds, those who knew him well said he didn't want his dogs around when he was at his weakest. That shows a side of Ozzy the public rarely saw, a man of deep love and quiet pride. He wanted to protect everyone, even his animals, from the sadness of goodbye. The small details keep adding up. In mid-June, he had all his old stage costumes taken out of storage. Family members thought he wanted to do a photo shoot. Instead, he spent a day quietly looking through them, touching the fabrics, holding the jackets. He just sat with the memories. That silent reflection tells a story louder than words ever could. Then there's his longtime assistant, Rob. Rob had worked with Ozzy since the early 90s. In an emotional message shared days after his passing, Rob said, he knew it was time, but he never stopped being Ozzy. That message confirms what fans suspected but didn't want to believe. Ozzy was aware of how close the end was, and he chose to face it with dignity. There's also the matter of his final meal, which Sharon later revealed in a quiet moment with family friends. It wasn't anything fancy, just mashed potatoes, roast chicken, and apple pie, his favorites. No grand feast, no last hurrah, just comfort food. It sounds simple, but in many ways, that's the most Ozzy thing of all. Stripped of fame and fortune, he wanted warmth. Reports now say that in his final 48 hours, he asked not to be filmed or photographed. He even told nurses to turn around if he got emotional. It was important to him that people didn't remember his pain, but his strength. That one request changes the tone of everything. It was a man in full control of his legacy. But perhaps the most heartbreaking new detail involves his grandchildren. Sharon shared privately with friends that Ozzy recorded short video messages for each of them to be played on their birthdays. He didn't want to leave without saying something special to each one. He planned those messages weeks in advance, choosing his words carefully. This was Ozzy as a grandfather, not a rock icon, and it's the side of him that now leaves fans in tears. Now it feels like the last page of a book that shaped generations. It's hard to ignore how much thought he put into this exit. The decision to pull out of every future award show, the quiet sale of a few remaining music rights, the closing of his private recording studio. None of these things were random. Ozzy Osbourne was putting his affairs in order, not out of fear, but out of respect for those he loved. In his final week, he asked Sharon to play 2 songs every morning, Changes by Black Sabbath and Dreamer from his solo career. He said they reminded him of who he was and who he became. Listening to those lyrics now, it's as if he was singing his goodbye in advance. He had given the world all the noise it could handle during his life. He didn't want his passing to be another headline. Even the Osbourne family reality show, once such a big part of their image, was never brought back despite fan demands. Now we know why. Ozzy didn't want his final chapter to be broadcast. He wanted it private, sacred, and his alone. A final thought that's now coming to light. The day before he passed, he reportedly requested to be wheeled into his garden. He sat under the trees, watched the sky, and asked for silence. No music, no phones, just nature. It was the kind of moment that most people dream of. Ozzy had found peace, not in fame, but in stillness. What we once thought was a sudden or mysterious passing now appears to be something else entirely. It was a deeply personal, carefully prepared goodbye from a man who lived wildly but passed on his terms. The loudest man in rock went out in a whisper, and that changes everything.